So my original plan for this week's video was talking about Invincible, but that didn't work out. I have been watching other stuff, but don't worry because I will do that video next, probably. Anyways, this week I'm gonna be talking about
film adaptations.
Specifically 2 different adaptations from the same source material with quite a few big differences. Manhunter from 1986 and Red Dragon from 2002. Both movies are adaptations of Thomas Harris's book Red Dragon, and just by looking at their names you can tell which movie was a more faithful adaptation. But the fact that a movie is more faithful to the source material does not mean that it's better than a more loose adaptation. After all, books and movies don't work the same way. You can't get a shot of a character's thought or feeling. When you have a movie, you gotta work it out some other way, but when you have a book, you can just write, "This character felt sad." I know that is the most used example of how these 2 artistic mediums differ from each other, but it doesn't make it any less valid. To illustrate my previous point of why sometimes faithful adaptations aren't better than a more loose adaptation,
just look at Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts.
The Harry Potter movies were adaptations of the novels by J.K. Rowling, and they were written by a completely different screenwriter. Fantastic Beasts, on the other hand, were written by J.K. Rowling herself, so you would think that they would be as faithful as possible to her own vision, that is, and especially when compared to movies that were written by someone else. After all, J.K. Rowling created the Wizarding World, but it is widely known and accepted that the Fantastic Beasts movies are not nearly as good as the Harry Potter movies. And if you wonder why,
it is mainly, in my opinion, because J.K. Rowling is just not a good screenwriter.
She did a great job writing the Harry Potter novels and creating likable characters and an amazing wizarding world, but novels and screenplays are very different, and excelling at one does not mean that you will be good at the other. Let's look at it this way. Fantastic Beasts feels like Thanksgiving leftovers. Sure, they're fine and some people really love them, including myself, but they are just not as good as a fresh Thanksgiving dinner, and that's how I see these 2 franchises. I'll have anything that will take me back to the Wizarding World, and I'm not gonna pretend that Fantastic Beasts are just good movies, because they are definitely not.
At least in my opinion.
Like I said just now, I will take anything that will allow me to go back to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, and this is all we got and nothing else. Yep, not a
play or anything like that. Nope.
But anyways, I know that's not the best example for my point, so I will focus on a better example, I guess. Like I mentioned before, Manhunter is a more loose adaptation of the Red Dragon novel, and it came out in 1986. It was a standalone movie. No sequels, no prequels, nothing. It was just a movie based on a novel. Another adaptation of the same book, simply titled Red Dragon, came out in 2002. It is a prequel of the Silence of the Lambs adaptation that came out just a few years after Manhunter. Both movies have a completely different cast, and most people you ask have at least heard of Silence of the Lambs.
Clarice
and Hannibal Lecter, who was portrayed masterfully by Anthony Hopkins, are just engraved in the pop culture worldwide. But anyways, while both Manhunter and Red Dragon are based on the same novel and have almost word by word the same dialogue at some points, Manhunter is a much better movie. And that's saying a lot, because Manhunter does not have Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal. Anyways, I gotta tell you guys the truth, and the truth is that I only watched Manhunter because of a meme. This meme. I heard positive things about this movie way before I saw that meme, but I never felt like watching Manhunter because I just couldn't imagine anyone other than Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal. But I liked that meme enough to give this movie a try. And I also heard that a song that I really like plays in the climax of the movie, so yeah, I just gave it a try. The moment the movie started, I knew it would be an 80s extravaganza treat. Everything about this movie says 80s nostalgia. The actors, the cinematography, the directing, and obviously the score are so 80s, and I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of that decade. But after a few minutes watching the movie, it started to really grow on me. And by the end of it, I became obsessed with this movie. It's really, really good. This video is not a movie review, but I will tell you just a brief review, I guess. Manhunter is not a perfect movie, not at all, but it quickly became a movie that I really admire and I enjoyed, obviously, and that I would love to rewatch soon. The story felt like the blueprints for Silence of the Lambs, and maybe one day I'll make a video about that too. But anyways, Manhunter has a much more compelling main character in my opinion, Will Graham, and I know that I've said in my opinion too many times, but
sometimes it's just not enough to say out loud a few times that this is your opinion. People will critique you, but anyways, I digress.
Will Graham, even though he talks to himself out loud way more than a normal person, you quickly start to care and worry about him. And to address the elephant in the room, Brian Cox is definitely not as good as Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal. But I think that this has more to do with how little he is in the actual movie than the actual performance. The main antagonist, played by Tom Noonan, aka the Tooth Fairy in this movie,
aka the Red Dragon,
is who in my opinion really steals the show. Directing and cinematography are quite good too. Also, the ending in my opinion was so good, and I think that the main reason why Manhunter is a better adaptation is that the ending just works a lot better in Manhunter than in Red Dragon. And because I can't explain why Manhunter is a better movie without spoiling the ending, here's your warning, spoilers ahead. In the original movie
and novel,
after the FBI figures out the serial killer's identity, we see that the Tooth Fairy killer is bringing his love interest to his house, setting it on fire, and quote-unquote shooting himself. After that, the girlfriend of the Tooth Fairy manages to escape the house before it explodes because of gas, I think. After that, Will Graham tells her that everything is okay, and he moves back to his home with his family, and everyone lives happily ever after, until the FBI figures out that the person that was shot wasn't actually Tooth Fairy himself, but someone else. I won't explain why, because it's not that important. Just know that the Tooth Fairy's girlfriend is blind and that she heard the gunshot and she assumed that the Tooth Fairy killed himself. And then Will Graham finds that at the same moment the Tooth Fairy is inside of his house, and after a tense standoff and struggle, he manages to shoot the Tooth Fairy and save himself and his family.
I did not like this.
It feels rushed, and there's too many plot conveniences that allowed this twist ending to happen, and in my opinion it makes the movie feel rushed again, obviously, and a bit silly. But maybe that's because The Red Dragon is just not a very good movie. It's competent at its best and very cringy at its worst. Also, it's probably the first time that a performance by Philip Seymour Hoffman kinda disappoints me. I'm a big fan of his work and I think he's one of the best actors that I've seen, but compared to his counterpart in Manhunter, he really let me down with his performance. And yes, we obviously don't have Anthony Hopkins in this one, but he also doesn't have that much to do in this movie. I think that Will Graham could have probably caught the Tooth Fairy without his help, and he also makes Will and his family get in danger. But anyways, this did not happen in Manhunter. In Manhunter, first of all, we get a much better performance from the Tooth Fairy. He feels creepy and in control at all times. I don't have anything against Ray Fiennes, but when the director of Red Dragon decides that we have to watch his butt for an uncomfortably long time, I can't take him seriously. His inner conflicts are more fleshed out in Red Dragon 2, but it just feels kind of absurd. I can't take the Tooth Fairy seriously when he eats that drawing in a museum after knocking out an old lady with a single punch. Also, what Manhunter does differently is that in the end, Will Graham figures out where the Tooth Fairy lives, and he gets to his house just in time to kick his ass to the sound of the song Inagara da Vida. It's an over-the-top scene with a lot of tension, and I'll take a scene like that anytime instead of a rushed and almost nonsensical twist ending.
I'm watching you, M. Night Shyamalan.
By making this change to the ending, we feel much more satisfaction because Will Graham is the one that actually saves the Tooth Fairy's girlfriend. In the ending of the other movie, we just must accept that for some reason the Tooth Fairy not only decides that he won't kill his girlfriend and implies that he will kill himself, but we also must accept that after he says these things, he still shoots the possibly dead body of another guy he kidnapped at the same time as he kidnapped his girlfriend. It feels just too anticlimactic when we see that his girlfriend just finds her way out of the house by herself, and it feels that the only reason why the author of this book made his girlfriend's character blind is so that we can have a twist ending. And before I forget, the red dragon tattoo looks a lot better on Tom Noonan from Manhunter. The one on Ray Fiennes looks like it's just the horns of the original painting, Red Dragon, on top of a crappy tribal tattoo. It is very early 2000s and it did not age well.
When was the last time that you saw someone with a tribal tattoo anyways?
And like I said, it's especially jarring when you see this very accurate representation of the horns that you see in the original painting, and when you just see it on top of a tribal tattoo, it like the two styles just clash and they are not well together. Also, the very bottom of the tattoo is right on top of Ray Fiennes' butt, and we have to watch it throughout the whole movie. I don't know, probably like a few minutes. And I think that anyone can agree that a few minutes of Ray Fiennes' butt on screen is not something that we signed up for when we wanted to watch this FBI thriller, however you want to describe this movie. I am not sure why they changed the ending of the movie for Manhunter, but I am glad that they did. You can argue that the ending is better executed in the book, but again, this is a movie.
Very different from a book.
They are two different art forms, and if you want to adapt a book, you have to make some sacrifices when you create a movie. It's not like someone can make a 4-hour movie adaptation of an already established.
Oh wait.
Anyways, that's just an example of why a movie can be good without being 100% faithful to its source material. That's why I don't like it when people complain about the Harry Potter adaptations when you have a 500-page book and you have to squeeze it all in a 2-hour movie. That is just completely unrealistic to expect unless you have a TV show. But again,
that TV show is not a movie.
If you have a TV show, then just go right ahead and complain about all the small subplots that you wanted to see on screen and they ended up cutting off from their show. So anyways, thank you so much for watching, and if you liked my video, please share it and subscribe so that I don't end up having this video with just 2 views.